Three, two, one, punch it.
Could you jump to light speed in that tin can? Go back in time in a DeLorean? Will it crash or take to the sky? Tell me, smart guy, does it fly?
Welcome to Does It Fly, the podcast that puts your favorite sci-fi properties, inventions, and conceits to the test. I'm your mad scientist, Hakeem Oluseyi.
And I'm your pop culture expert, Tamara Krinsky. Time to dive into today's topic and see, does it fly?
This episode of Does It Fly is presented by ScreenUK. Tamara, we're back.
Hakeem, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, friends. Thank you for joining Tamara and me on our well-thought-through podcast. What are we going to do? Tell them. It's still new. They don't know our format. You let them know.
All right, today we are going to talk about the cult classic Attack the Block. And Hakeem is going to talk about whether the science in it flies. I'm going to talk about whether the story piece flies. And then we're going to talk about, do the vibes fly? Is it just so cool that you just want to watch it no matter what?
All right, and that's the structure of every episode, right? Our three-part structure: science, story, vibe. So thank you, because before you introduced me to this, I had never heard of Attack the Block, and I loved it. I'm not saying I love the science. I'm not saying I love the science. I'm saying I was entertained from front to back. And what I love, so for those of you who have not seen it, it's British. And it takes place allegedly because I don't know the neighborhoods of Britain, in one of the toughest neighborhoods. So they got their slang, their swang, and their swag. And I just love the language of the movie.
That's right. So it's an alien invasion movie that takes place, as you said, in South London. And I know that the language piece was really important to Joe Cornish, who's the director. This was actually his first film. And he talked about the fact that he really wanted to make a movie that was sort of inspired by this idea. He'd seen the movie Signs, which is with Mel Gibson. It's another alien invasion movie. And he was curious what would happen if you set this in South London. And he had also been mugged. And he got very curious by a group of young people, and he got very curious about why they did what they did. And that became a key part of this movie. So this is sort of a classic, it's got that classic trope of, you've got a gang of kids who are our heroes, and, they've all got different personality types.
That's an understatement. Yeah.
Right. So the ensemble is led by John Boyega, who everybody now knows as the rebellious stormtrooper Finn from Star Wars movies. But this was prior to that. And also Jodie Whittaker is one of the stars. She plays Sam, who's a recently graduated nursing student, otherwise known as our Lady Doctor Who. So it's really cool to see these two interact a little bit earlier in their careers.
This episode of Does It Fly is presented by ScreenUK. ScreenUK is a free discovery platform celebrating the very best of UK-produced film, television, animation, and gaming, and sharing it with audiences around the world. ScreenUK is the go-to place to discover your next favorite movie, show, or game, and features tons of exclusive behind-the-scenes interviews and all the info you need to find out how and where to watch or play your newest obsessions wherever you are in the world. Make ScreenUK.org your next stop. Yeah, that is awesome. So the year is 2016, right? That's the year the movie came out.
2011, actually.
2011? Holy
Yeah,
cow.
they shot it in 2010, and then it premiered at South by Southwest. It premiered in a midnight screening, and as the story goes, as Joe Cornish tells it, it started, and he was so nervous that he actually couldn't stay in the theater while it was playing. So he left, and he went and sat down on the floor listening in to see what the reactions would be like. And the reactions were amazing. You've got this basic premise of an alien invasion, but there's comedy, there's a lot of humor in it, and there's some social commentary as well.
Yeah. You know what's so cool about it to me? I don't know about you, but when I go to a streaming service and I look for movies, if I'm not looking for something specifically, I typically start with the most recent, right? Okay. And so being 13 years old, man, this really holds up. It's I didn't feel it didn't feel like a 2011 movie to
When
me.
you said being 13 years old, for a minute, I thought you were talking about yourself. And I was like, do you mean your inner 13-year-old
Maybe in
connected with
Mars
it?
years. I don't. I'm older than 13 in Mars years. Maybe in asteroid belt years. So you brought up mugging. I got a mugging story for you. So I don't
Really?
know if you've ever been mugged. I've been mugged,
I
but
have.
I have too. My mugging story is the mugging story of me. But since it's a British show, a British movie, it involves an American and a European. So I did my postdoc at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory in Berkeley, California. And so, as the story goes, right before I got there, this European and American postdoc were out walking one night in Berkeley, and a guy comes up, pulls out his weapon, and demands their phones and wallets. The American hands it over. The European guy goes, "No, you can't have it." And the guy goes, "You better give it to me." He's like, "No, you better run." And the guy pauses for a second, then he runs away. But then the European turns to the American guy and goes, "Look, man, you can't give your wallet to every guy with a gun who tells you to give it to him."
Well, when I got mugged, I gave my wallet to
Hey,
the two guys who had the gun. And yeah, I mean, they
hey, for
actually
me, it was
had me. They
about
had me
5
flagged.
guys, and I was the most cooperative human on the planet at that moment.
Yeah,
I think we
seriously.
became friends. I mean,
They
just
had
kidding.
me flat down on the ground. We did not become friends.
Oh man,
Yeah,
wow,
it was
yeah.
not good. So what's the idea that we're gonna be talking about today? What are we looking at?
Well, the idea that we're talking about is how the aliens actually get to Earth and
Mhm.
on Earth.
Okay.
All right. And so when you watch the movie, they come in like meteorites. You see like this trail of fire hitting the ground, right?
Yeah.
They never give us an actual scientific explanation. What
Mhm.
happens is one of the characters speculates
Mhm.
on how they got here. So I'm like, what do I do with that? Right? They're speculating. They're not really saying this is what it is.
Right. I
And
think you take it as the premise, though. I mean,
so here's an interesting thing. Does it fly? People, I think we don't explicitly think this, but it's in there that spaceships fly, that they're out there flying,
mhm.
but they're not. All motion in
Wait, what?
space is falling. Everything that is moving in space is falling. The Earth is falling around the sun. The sun is falling around the center of the galaxy, Sagittarius A star. So spaceships don't fly, they fall.
Okay, keep going. Go on. Go on.
Well, flight involves buoyancy, well, that's maybe floating, or lift, right? So you don't need lift. You just need sufficient speed so as not to strike an object, but actually go around it. And, if you're trapped around it, it's going to be an ellipse. If you're not trapped, it's going to be a hyperbola, right? So when we had a Oumuamua, this rock that came from another solar system, we knew it came from outside of our solar system for one reason only: the
Why?
speed at which it was moving. You can also look at the direction from which it comes,
Mhm.
because most things in the solar system orbit in the same plane, right? So if it's a rocky body, typically that means it's within Uranus's orbit, right? It's in that part of the solar system that we call the solar system.
Mhm.
But there is allegedly a spherical distribution of comets called the Oort cloud that surrounds the solar system. And so sometimes comets do come in from like over the poles of the sun or something like that. It's not in the plane of the orbit. So the point I'm getting at is when you do interstellar travel, if you're an alien going from one star system to another, you're going to arrive at your destination moving incredibly fast. They didn't even leave craters, right? They just crush a car. If you imagine something, so escape velocity at Earth is 26,000 miles per hour. So that means that they're coming in way faster than that.
Mhm.
And then they hit our atmosphere. They should just explode instantly. If it was that small and they're moving that fast, they should just explode. But they don't. They
They don't.
survive it and they enter Earth. But now, how do they get here? So here is what the
Mhm.
guy speculates.
Yeah.
They rode the sun's waves
Okay,
into the solar
I
system.
wanted to ask you about this because what
Yeah.
does that mean exactly? Like, they're
I'm
not
going
just
to have a sip of coffee to amp myself up because I'm about to go in.
Oh,
Because they
science
are
me up,
tripping.
Hakeem. Science me up.
I'm allowed to science you up. What's that song? Ooh, whoa, I want to science you up. So let's get on these sun's rays things. So the sun is really interesting. Here is the model. If you want a model of the sun's rays, let me give you my little toy model.
Okay.
Imagine a sphere. Let's make it gold, a golden sphere.
Yes.
Now cover that tiny sphere with a bunch of tiny holes. Now stick some sort of source of a fluid in it.
Mhm.
All right. And turn that sucker on full blast, high pressure. So those tiny holes are each spraying out a jet of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of what the sun is doing, sitting in the center of our solar system, shooting out these jets. But they're not liquids, they're plasma. Now, here's the thing. Go back to our little golden ball and imagine in the center of every hole, there's a tiny thread. And so the liquid that shoots out is shooting along that thread. All right. So with the sun, that thread would be a magnetic field. And the plasma moves out along those magnetic fields. All right. And it's the magnetic fields themselves that are energizing. And they do have waves. They have waves that do this, torsional waves, and they have these kind of waves, right? Transverse waves. But now, let's take our ball with its spinning and its threads and started rotating.
I feel like the threads are going to get really tangled.
That's exactly what happens. That's what happens to the magnetic fields. Yeah.
Okay.
And they could reconnect with each other. They put energy in the plasma. And so if you look at the sun, this stream of material away along these magnetic fields, it flies out on average from 400 kilometers per second to 800 kilometers per second. They call the slow speed and the high speed solar wind. That's per second, 400, 800. Now, here's what's crazy about that. Gravity at the surface of the earth, at the sun is 60 times greater than gravity at the surface of the earth. There are these waves, and that magnetic field gets wound up in what we call a Parker spiral, right? So instead of coming straight in, you got to come in like a spiral to the sun, right? But the point is the following is this.
Yeah.
The waves move out, not in.
Okay, that's a very big problem.
Right?
If that's the premise,
Yeah.
that doesn't work.
That doesn't work. Exactly.
That does not work.
You got to ride solar waves in like nuts. Makes no sense whatsoever.
Okay, so that's one science thing that comes up. The other thing that comes up, because again, I also want to point out, again, for people who may not be as familiar with the movie, there was very, very little time spent in the film on how the aliens are getting here and what exactly makes them tick and why they, in particular, keep running after Moses, who's John Boyega's character. So the other science thing that comes up is this idea of pheromones. And and again, this is like a 5-minute scene in the movie where they're like, well, maybe. It turns out one of the guys who they keep running into in this adventure in the block. So Attack of the Block refers to like a tower in South London. Like
The hood.
here, you might call it a housing project, whatever you call it. But so as far as one of the guys they keep running into, there's a weed dealer who is played by Nick Frost, who you might know from Shaun the Dead.
Yes.
You look very
Clutch
shocked.
my pearls.
Oh my goodness. You gonna be okay? You gonna be all right?
Maybe. After a seance.
And so he hangs out a lot with a guy named Brewis, who turns out to have studied zoology and biology. So in this conversation about how all of this goes down, he puts out the idea that a female alien came and she is spreading her pheromones for the male aliens to then come and invade and impregnate her. And part of the reason they keep going after Moses, John Boyega's character, is because he killed her and her pheromones are all over him. So that's the other science piece of this. So does that fly?
Yeah, well, here's the thing about those pheromones. Pheromones fly. There's no question about that. I'm always like running after some alien because of well, the reason why the movie has problems is because the aliens are coming from outer space. So the question is, do they follow the pheromones to the planet? Or are they already on their way to the planet? We're all going to this planet. We just got to find each other once we get there. And then they track the pheromones.
That is a good question.
That's a good question, right? Because I think the implication is that they follow the female to the planet. using the
Mhm.
pheromones, right? The female is out there searching for planets. Again, I think they speculate, right? They
Yeah.
don't say, I am the writer of the movie and this is what I have conclusively determined. They're like,
No,
hey,
and that works because, like, you would not expect a gang of kids, like, ranging in age from, like, 10 to 16-ish to have a scientific explanation for how the aliens arrived on Earth.
and you
I
know
mean,
what
they
they do
might. I'm not
have?
saying they couldn't, but the way that this movie is set
Right.
up, that doesn't seem to really be what they're into.
If the pheromones are bringing the males to the planet to find the female, as I think the movie is indicating, then again, that doesn't fly because what type of pheromone is this? A pheromone is typically a chemical. And that chemical, you know, how long will it take it to even diffuse through Earth's atmosphere? You
Wait, hold
know?
on. I'm gonna actually ask you to walk it back even further. Like,
Okay.
explain the base. What are the basics of what a pheromone is?
Pheromones are chemistry and biology. Chemistry and biology have something in it that physics doesn't have. You know what that is?
What?
Nasty. They got
Oh, I cannot wait to see what the comments are that we get on that. What do you mean by nasty?
all right. Well, I mean, bodily fluids and things like that, pheromones, puking, all these kind of bodily processes. So, the thing about a pheromone is a chemical that gives off a signal, right? So most often we think of them in terms of reproduction, but they can serve other purposes. You can use pheromones to draw a mate, or you can use them to communicate other messages. And in particular, what they do is they elicit a social behavior response from the other animal or plant that, or even single-celled organism that encounters that particular pheromone. And so in this case, the behavior is, hey, let's reproduce together, right? That poor female alien, because when the male aliens start arriving from outer space, it's a swarm.
Yeah, I'm gonna get into that when we talk about some story stuff because I have some questions about that.
So let me just sum it up for you. So, as far as traveling through space on solar rays, that is something that can actually be done. There's different forms of propulsion. There's electric sail propulsion. You can have a physical sail like mylar film. You can have an electric sail where you create an electric field, and because the particles streaming away from the sun and other stars are electrically charged, you can get a thrust out of that. Or you can have a magnetic sail, and a magnetic sail is pretty clever because the thing about a mechanical sail is that as you move away from the sun, the density of the solar wind falls off, right? You have the same amount of stuff have to cover a much larger surface area out at that radius, right? But here's the thing, for a magnetic sail, the magnetic sail is compressed by the pressure of the solar wind. And as it flows away and the pressure decreases, the sail actually gets bigger because the pressure dropped. So it can maintain thrust for longer. Okay.
Mhm.
So the idea of riding solar rays, as they call it, which is, again, there's no such thing as a solar ray.
Right.
There are waves, right? There are waves on
Mhm.
the magnetic fields. There's waves in the plasma, but they're all flowing outwards. You do get reflections because sometimes you have, the sun puts out bursts of stuff, and sometimes you have fast moving stuff that encounters slow moving stuff, creating a shock, and you get a backwards reflection, and we actually see the magnetic field. I don't know if you heard of the Parker Solar Probe,
I have
the
not heard of the Parker
spacecraft
Solar Probe. Uh-uh.
that's gone the closest to the sun. Well, when they measured magnetic
Oh,
fields,
yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
that's the one, right? When you measured magnetic fields, they found them switching direction, right? Which is nuts, right? This big giant thing, millions of miles out into space, just
Right.
suddenly going floop floop, right? They call them switchbacks.
Mhm.
And that has to do with those interactions, right? So even if you do have some ingoing solar waves, they're not outside of the solar system, right? They're not going to bring you into the solar system. So that doesn't fly. Then there is the speed at which they're moving when they arrive, right? In their little capsules. That does not fly. They're going way too slow. And then the third thing is just surviving reentry. Maybe there's some technology in there I don't know about. I can see somehow being able to make that happen. But think about going over Niagara Falls in a barrel.
Okay.
It's the equivalent, but falling light years. Instead of, yeah, right?
Okay.
And then here comes the space pheromones, right? That doesn't fly either. So as far as I'm concerned, the science of attack the block does not fly at all.
All right, we have a definitive answer. And yet, you talked at the beginning about the fact that you love this movie. So let's segue into the question of, does it fly as a story?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay, so let's start with the fact that you've got a director who's a huge genre fan, right? And there are certain tropes of the genre. One of the things that he does, I think, incredibly well is the visual representation of these aliens on screen. So you've got the female alien that you mentioned, and she's kind of clear. She's a little bit weaker. She's, sort of gloppy and jellyfish-ish, and that's who Moses kills at the beginning of the movie. And then you've got all of these invading males, and they look very different. They are black. They are furry. They have these glowing turquoise teeth. And it's kind of terrifying.
Absolutely. And what do they call them? Wolf bear or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think they call them wolves at one point. They call bears. I mean, I think they sort of look like big fuzzy gorillas. So here's the thing to know: these are not CGI creations. This was actually, really. This was actually an actor in a suit. His name playing the alien most of the time. His name is Terry Notary, and he has done a ton of stuff, everything from Avatar to Planet of the Apes. And, he's a stunt coordinator, he's a movement double and a movement coach. And so what they did have, though, the suit had these arm extenders that would kind of allow him, to lope in that sort of gorilla-like lope. Now, they did do some enhancements with CGI on the actual fur. But the big thing also was to make it so that it wasn't reflective of any light. So that way they essentially disappeared in the dark. And then you had these crazy teeth, that are sort of these very scary looking fangs. They glow turquoise. So that's what you see in the nighttime. And Joe Cornish uses that to really great effect for all kinds of scary moments. And, the sound design really works. You see pieces of things, and then you just see this these glowing sets of teeth. And sometimes it's outside a window. Sometimes it's around the corner. Oh my God. By the way, we didn't mention, I can't remember if we said this, but obviously when we talk about these things, we're talking in details. If you've gotten this far, we've already totally spoiled the movie for you. But yes, if you haven't seen the movie, stop right now, go watch it, then come back and keep listening so we don't keep.
It's worth it.
Right, exactly. Funnily enough, Joe Cornish has said that he was inspired for the look of the aliens by his own black cat. And he's a big fan of 1980s pop culture by the design of the aliens on the cabinet for the Space Invaders game.
No way.
And then the green sharp teeth practically on set, they actually use some of those fake Dracula teeth to help make them.
Yeah. My favorite line, and I mean, there are so many great lines in this movie, but when the guy goes, "I don't think them eyes," or something like that. I don't think those are eyes.
There's so many great lines, and I think that comes from some of the strength of the casting, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about
that's what I was wondering. I'm like, is it the writing or the cast?
Well, it's honestly, I think it's both. I think it's really both. I think that they saw over 1,500 kids for this. When they were auditioning. John Boyega actually first heard about it from an online posting. And then they reached out to teachers. They did all kinds of outreach because they wanted kids who would feel like these street kids. He didn't want somebody who was going to sort of put on, I'm a, da-da-da-da-da. So the actors have talked about the fact that it was kind of terrifying on set, right? Because you had this guy actually running after them, and he was pretty speedy. Like I said, he does a lot of movement work. So, and also apparently it was kind of hard to see when you're inside the suit. So you got your cue, and if you were being chased and you just stopped or lost your way, they would they would keep going and run into you. So there was definitely a fear of like, this is happening. So
I could get
having,
impaled on a fang.
I know, right? So having that practical piece of it
Yeah.
was really, really helpful for the actors. So that's good. I mean, but talking about personal things, going back to your comment before about like you had this one female with her pheromones, and
Yes.
then you have this like massive amount of male aliens coming. So like as a lady,
Yeah.
that's actually one thing that bumped me because if you've just got one lady alien and you've got all these males coming, you are getting prepared for quite an invasion herself. And
Right.
so I was like, wait, that's a lot of impregnation going on. Like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a situation, they seem to be mammals, but maybe it's a situation where she has a litter. But even so, there were a lot more male aliens coming down in those meteor fireballs, so even if it's a litter, I was like, huh. Or maybe, I mean, it's a queen type situation,
You know what I thought?
but
I thought that at first that maybe there was like a bunch of them, and this is what the ones that were nearby until they clarified that they've only landed at the block. There is
right.
no other place where these aliens are. So it's like
Yeah.
all those for her. So what they should have been doing is fighting each other, right? They should be fighting each other for the
Right.
right.
Or
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that was something that bumped me. And the other thing too that bumped me was a little bit of kind of going back to what you were saying about riding the solar winds, right? So there's a point in the film where there's another trope that I do love is, in this sort of like gang that you've got, and this goes back to like other movies, like even like The Outsiders, which isn't a sci-fi movie, where classic movie of like a gang of guys. There's always going to be like the two younger kids who want to be
Right.
part of what the big boys are
Yeah.
doing.
Always.
And in
Always.
this one, there's
Yeah.
two young kids. They're super cute. I think in
Yeah.
the movie, I think they're 9 and 10. I think in real life, the
Wait a
actors
minute.
are
Their
10.
names though. What were their names? Mayhem
Mayhem and Probs,
and Probs.
which I'm not even gonna like give you a bad Cockney accent saying that, or not Cockney, but South London accent saying that. I'm not gonna like ruin your ears that way.
Mayhem and Probs. Hey, that
Mayhem
could be
and
our
Probs.
monikers if we go on the
Oh
road.
yeah. So are
You-
you Mayhem or are you Probs?
That's exactly.
But so they use a water gun filled with petrol and heat, and they basically firebomb the alien.
Spoiler.
I told you there were going to be spoilers.
Yeah.
But like my question is, if that shows that they can't survive intense heat, then how are they supposed to survive coming in through the atmosphere?
Right? They have that super heat shield on their little capsules that
Right.
that also decelerate them somehow.
Yeah, exactly. So like that was a bump. But that said, like speaking of the human piece of all of this,
Yes, yes.
that to me is honestly what I think from a story perspective makes this movie fly.
Is what?
Which is the human piece of this. So like the social commentary that this
Oh.
film incorporates, right?
Mhm.
So you've got your alien invasion movie, crazy creatures. We already talked about, how well they look on screen. You've got this engaging cast of characters. It would be a fun romp no matter what. But the reason that I think that this movie has become kind of this has gathered this cult following, which includes me, is because it actually goes a step beyond to make some social commentary. It looks at this world of, this South London neighborhood and this idea that you have these kids who are doing whatever they need to survive, which, as we said, it kicks off
Mugging
with
people.
mugging,
Yeah.
right? And then ultimately, it does follow like that trope of sort of collecting and putting together a team that's going to fight against the aliens, sort of the unlikely alliance, which eventually includes Sam, the woman who they initially try to mug. And you have this idea that should there be an alien invasion, the kids or the people who you are normally afraid of actually become the first line of defense.
Wow.
So there's that idea.
Well put.
Thank you. Yeah, there's, the idea that you force a community to come together to put aside their differences. What do
Right.
you do when resources are short? And also, even just from the very beginning, it is grounded in the reality of these kids, right? Like
Right.
when they first find the female alien. And I also want to mention this takes place on Guy Fawkes Night, which is a night in the UK where there's tons of fireworks and celebration and stuff like that. So when they first see things flying through the air, everyone just thinks they're fireworks, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
yeah,
not, it's not, that's sort of like not such a big deal. And so the setup for that really helps to then propel the story. But you kind of go through and you have this group come together. Oh, that's what I was saying. When they first start, and the mugging happens, and then it's interrupted by the appearance of the female alien, and Moses kills her, and he basically throws her over his shoulder, and they all start talking about how they're going to find more of them and they're going to get money for it. It is grounded in their reality of just trying to survive every day in a not well-resourced area of town and what they need. I mean, they're not thinking about like the science of it. They're not thinking about,
They're
becoming
like, we're
rich.
about to get paid.
Yeah, they want to get paid.
Yeah, yeah.
And later on, there's a whole piece of the story that deals with a drug dealer. And as we mentioned
Right.
before, there's Ron, who's a stoner who like has his apartment and a weed room and stuff like that. The idea that the weed room is the safest place for them to store the female alien, which is where
Yeah.
they eventually put her, because that's the most protected place, the safest place in this community, in this area. So all of these little details really ground it in a bigger storyline. And I think that is something that, watching it again today, it's real prevalent. You know me, I like my quotes in my research. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
actually a really great quote from Daniel D. Snyder in The Atlantic when he was writing a review of it. So I'm going to read it. Moses realizes that it was own reckless actions that brought the creatures and are causing those around him to suffer. The parallels to reality, where seemingly meaningless acts of crime bring more brutal law enforcement and increased poverty, are blunt but touching. It's a rare thing in today's movie climate when a hostile alien species tells us more about ourselves than just how many rounds we can fire in a minute.
Wow.
Right. He
Yeah,
went
that's
there.
pretty nice. So let me ask you something about those actors.
Mhm.
I got to be on a movie set once for
Mhm.
one day in my life,
Yeah.
and it was Ice Cube and Tracy Ellis Ross filming a scene.
Uh-huh.
And what I found fascinating is they had the actors do the scenes as written with the
Mhm.
written dialogue.
Yeah.
Then they had them redo it without using the dialogue, but stay within the story, but
Mhm.
speak, you just go.
Yeah.
And so the lines that those kids were delivering and the way they were delivering them came across so authentic. Have you done any research into how they recorded it? Did they do that? Were they allowed to just?
Yeah, it was a mix. Yeah.
It was
So
a
there
mix.
was, first off, they rehearsed. And so to kind of build up that bond between them, if you want to go look online, there's some great behind the scenes stuff of them like practicing like the motorbike stuff and all of that. And then they would do it as written, but he allowed for some improv. And every director is different. Like some directors are like, you do it exactly as it is written. And some directors are like, yeah, let's do one as written, or let's get the one in the can as written, but then let's, have some room for improv. And certainly that happens in comedy. And this for sure, has comedic elements, and the stuff that comes out of these kids' mouths is like,
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I'm like,
it's great.
I've been missing this for over a decade. How did I, especially after the pandemic, because,
Mhm.
I would watch movies on airplanes. I was working in Africa for
Yeah.
a decade. So you had these super long trips and I was in economy. So instead of lying flat and sleeping, I'd watch 3 movies or so. Right. But then when the pandemic hit, that's when I really binged everything I could find. And so I was looking for all kind of sci-fi, all kind of anime, and then I like some stuff that's inspiring also.
Sure.
And I thought that I had really exhausted the world because I get into foreign films as well,
Sure.
typically Korean and Bollywood.
Mhm.
Some of the Northern European stuff, some Norwegian stuff I've watched during that time period too. But I'm like, how did I miss this? It's so good. It's a cult classic. It's like missing Army of Darkness,
Well, that's the great thing about doing this show, right? Like sometimes we
Yeah.
get to see stuff we're less familiar with.
That's right. Yeah.
So I would say for me,
Yes.
this flies from a story side.
Don't be soft on them.
I'm not being soft. I mean, I think again there were a couple of bumps, but for me, ultimately, those bumps didn't take away my enjoyment or belief in this world, and also the fact that I almost think in some ways the fact that they didn't spend very much time trying to figure out what was going on with these
Yeah,
aliens or where they were
right.
from, it was very grounded in their experience of it,
In the
not
moment.
in the
Yeah,
moment,
yeah.
and that kinetic energy that kept cycling through. I was on for the
Right.
ride, and I
And
had a great ride.
so you definitely anticipated my one story issue and the fact that they, I'm like, okay, if there is a sequel,
Mhm.
then maybe they'll end up talking to some scientist who will say,
Are
oh,
you trying
yes.
to get a job?
Oh, that's a great idea. Always. Technical consultant here. Do you need
Right.
an alien? Call 1-800 Dr. O. Uh, you know what? My last name has 7 letters. I can turn it into a phone number. But,
But then
you
people
know,
would have to figure out how to spell Olushade.
there you go, right? So that's the thing about it is that I wish I really had more insight into the aliens. It was sort of left as
Mhm.
a hanging storyline that wasn't ever fulfilled. And I think that's a
Yeah.
good thing to leave room for the sequel where they go more into it. But who knows? By that time, the aliens might be different, right? Because that's what happens sometimes. It's like I mentioned Army of Darkness. You remember how The Living Dead 2 ended and then Army of Darkness began. They were kind of related, but wasn't. It was like that doesn't really follow from that, right? So it flies story wise. It does not fly scientifically.
Does it fly for all the feels? How does it fly on the vibe side?
Oh man, I'm telling you, I loved it. I loved it. I don't care that the science sucked. I, and that's the other thing is that
Mhm.
typically aliens it did not fit expectation because oftentimes these aliens have these superhuman abilities to survive
Mhm.
no matter what you do to them.
Right.
Not these aliens.
No. No,
Yeah,
these aliens were
they were just like us.
they were definitely vulnerable to the
Yeah,
machinations of,
yeah, a bat, a fire.
right, and that for me and I think too, again, that's part of why I would agree, I just had so much fun watching this, and
Yeah,
some of it comes from that inventiveness, right? They were pulling out whatever was around them. I mean, a super soaker, as you were saying, a bat, they
yeah.
were gearing up. I mean, it, kinda reminded me a little bit of, going back to another classic, going back to E.T. when they were,
Oh yeah,
putting together their stuff to, get E.T. actually to
yeah.
save E.T. in this case, not to kill the alien,
Right.
but,
Yeah.
a gang of kids getting ready to take something on.
Yeah, and that's I like their response, right? Because I've always said that. Have you ever seen, in the early days of YouTube, there were these videos, and they were like, "Never scare a black man." Are you familiar with that?
I
Where
am
somebody
not, no.
pops up in the Halloween suit, and the dude instead of being scared, he just punches it in the face, right? And so that's the thing is that when I moved to the city from the country, right? Because we'd sit around because we didn't have TV like that, right? It's before cable, and
Okay,
because we're in rural America, and you
right,
tell a lot of stories, and they would tell us kids, these ghost stories and everything, and
sure.
so we were all wired for when you see a ghost, you know what you do?
What do
Punch it
you
in the face and run. you know, if it's too close, you punch it in the face.
Well, see, I
Monster
don't
pops up,
understand
punch it
that
in the
'cause,
face. Huh?
when I think of a ghost, I don't think with someone who's got a corporeal form, so I would think you would just punch it and it would go through.
Even still, I'm gonna dissociate him with the wind of my punch. If you're made of particles, I am going to attack. You are not ghosts. You picked the wrong one. Like those kids say, they picked those aliens picked the wrong neighborhood.
See, and
That
now
is how. If you're from the hood, that's how you react. A lot of people they're like, "What's that? Let me stick my head out the window." Then an alien eats their face. Right? That's not.
right.
No, no, no. You come out swinging.
Yeah. See, that I can buy. That I could absolutely buy. This actually could be a really cool, like, high school or college chemistry or biology class where
Ooh,
it's like how to fight off an alien invasion, and then you look
yeah,
at different kinds of aliens,
yeah,
like these guys who are, who are mammals, you've got your
yeah,
aliens that are more sort of goo form, you've got your insectoid
yeah.
aliens. Like, look at all these different life forms, look at their vulnerabilities and talk
That's
about
right.
and then break that
Well,
down into the biology and the chemistry of it all.
let me tell you what scares
The
me.
people that you don't like who you think are nasty.
Right. Those biological people. That's the ones. So let me tell you what's really troubling about this is that, we assume that if there are other aliens and other life forms, they're going to be on terrestrial worlds like us. And most of the terrestrial planets we're finding, which could be a bias in our techniques for discovering them, are called super Earths. They're more massive than the Earth is. So that means they're going to have much stronger gravity, which means that those aliens are going to be much stronger than we are. And they're also going to be short because if you have strong gravity, you can't really be too tall, right? So I
But wait,
imagine,
does that mean that I just have stronger gravity than people around me?
well, it depends on how you define it. You're experiencing, well, here's the thing.
For those who don't know, and you get whether you're watching or listening, I'm sitting down, so you wouldn't be able to tell. I'm a massive 4'11", so I'm just
And
a
that's in
giant.
centimeters. All right. So in terms of the feels for me, man, I was so like the characters were so endearing. Like each, I look at you got the group of kids, you got the
Mhm,
woman who got mugged, you got the
mhm.
pothead guys. Like all of them became sympathetic characters, right? There was no like, I hate that character. Every character to me was
Hon
just
The only characters that I hated, honestly, were the cops.
there were police there. I don't remember that.
Yeah, at the end. Yeah, that's actually the whole point of the ending. At the
Oh,
end,
that's
all
right.
right, I'm gonna talk about the end, so at this point, the whole thing's been spoiled, but I'm just like yeah, I mean, at the end, what happens is that so the setup in the beginning with the mugging is that Sam, the nurse, played by Jodie Whittaker, had gone to the police. So there at various points throughout the movie, the police are looking for the muggers, mainly, Moses and his friends. Unfortunately, by the end, a couple of them have been killed off by the aliens. But Moses is still around. And at the end, he ultimately is the one who saves everybody and essentially like uses himself as well, essentially almost as like bait to, because at this point they've talked about this pheromone theory. And so he's using himself to draw off the attackers from everybody else in the block, in the tower. And everybody there realizes that, but the police have shown up and they're going after him because they think because they think that he's done something wrong, and because they're trying to catch him for the mugging. And so
Yeah.
it's like,
Oh, it's more than the mugging at this point, right?
yeah,
Because the aliens ate the police who originally had arrested
right.
him, and he got blamed for that. Yeah,
Exactly. So,
yeah,
you've got this, and again, that ties into like the larger social picture of like
yeah, yeah,
there are assumptions they're making about these kids. There's, all kinds of stuff.
yeah.
So, one of the last scenes is one of the very last scenes is him leaving the tower and he's hanging on to the Union Jack, which is rather
I
ironic,
saw that too. I was like,
right?
wow,
Yeah, yeah,
wow.
yeah. So anyway, so same thing for me, like all the feels, all the vibes,
Yeah,
had a
yeah,
great time watching this. It stuck
yes,
with me.
yes,
I'm still thinking about it. So
yeah.
when it comes to does it fly for the feels, I give it a big yes.
So do I. It is delivering. I loved it. Can't wait for the sequel.
Same. Yeah. I hope
Yeah.
that gets made. All right. Well,
And by the way, should we say nobody's paying us to say this? We're just our
oh yeah, we probably should actually. Yeah.
yeah,
Like
this is
this
our
is
authentic evaluation. We're not the man.
yeah, this is not a commercial that has been paid
Yeah,
for
we're not
by.
hacks or what is that word when you shill? We're not
We're
shilling.
not shills, we're not stups, we're not now, but
We
hacks
got
work
the
too.
chills, not the shills.
Well, if you want to keep up with what we are doing here on Does It Fly, you can follow Does It Fly Pod on YouTube and TikTok. And we want to know what you think. We want to know what you think of this episode. We want to know if there are other ideas that you have for future episodes of the movies or TV properties you want us to take a look at. And also make sure to hit that subscribe button on youtube.com, Does It Fly Pod, so that you won't miss an episode.
That's right. Subscribe, like, and, compliment us. Be like, oh, Hakeem, I can't see your abs on the broadcast, but I'm sure they're amazing under that fat.
There's so many things I want to say, and I'm just going to, leave that on the...
Dear Tamara, you're so awesome. I love the way that you talk about sci-fi.
We'll leave the comments to you guys. But it would definitely
comments off.
But if you have been enjoying what we've been doing, please leave a lovely 5-star review. It'll help other people find the show. And you can also check us out. You can check out the show notes and more information at doesitflypod.com. And of course, don't forget to follow Roddenberry Entertainment. It's Instagram is at Roddenberry Official. You can find us at facebook.com/Roddenberry, and we are at Roddenberry at Twitter.
That's right. Follow us everywhere. Listen, watch, and enjoy.
Till next time.
How can we exit in a cool sci-fi way that is in the mode of attack the bot? I know. What if a giant alien came and ate us both?
I'm down with that.